The lecture amphitheater of the Andorian Imperial Academy thrummed with the restless noise of 57 species, each convinced their civilization was the pinnacle of galactic progress. The air buzzed with pride, arrogance, and the faint tang of ozone from the chamber's energy shielding. At the podium stood Professor Keelar, a six-armed Vexonian whose self-regard eclipsed even his encyclopedic knowledge. Adjusting the crystalline monocle perched on his elongated face, he scanned the attendants' manifest with disdain. His voice carried a sharp, metallic resonance as he sneered. "Ah, delightful. Another human has chosen to grace us with their primitive company." The professor's tone dripped with derision potent enough to corrode durasteel. "Class, please welcome our Terra Prime exchange student, Zara Blackthorne." The hall doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and in stepped what looked like the most ordinary human specimen imaginable. She was short, barely a fraction over 5 feet, with unruly auburn hair that gave the impression of someone who had lost a duel with a plasma conduit. The standard-issue Academy jumpsuit hung awkwardly on her frame, resembling more a discarded balloon than a uniform. A ripple of laughter moved through the alien ranks. "Oh, how quaint," murmured Velter, a sleek, blue-skinned Alarion whose people had harnessed faster-than-light engines millennia before humanity struck its first flame. His 4 eyes glimmered with amusement. "Look at those tiny limbs. How does it even manipulate advanced machinery?" Zara walked steadily to the back row, unfazed by the chorus of snickers, clicks, and the wet, gurgling laughter of the Gorbanian slugfolk. Without acknowledging them, she retrieved an archaic tablet from her satchel, a relic that belonged in a museum, and began scrolling through notes on quantum mechanics far beyond introductory level. Professor Keelar cleared all 6 of his throats at once, producing a sound disturbingly similar to grinding gears mixed with strangled felines. "Today," he declared, "we shall examine the theoretical boundaries of consciousness transfer across dimensional divides. But before we begin," his lips curled into a smile that promised cruelty, "Miss Blackthorne, perhaps you can enlighten us with your human insight." The room chuckled in unison. Zara lifted her gaze from her tablet, blinking as though surfacing from a daydream. "Are you honestly asking me to solve the same riddle your kind has wrestled with for over 3,000 years? The laughter stilled. The silence that followed was not reverent but dangerous, the kind of silence that hung in the air right before someone was spaced through an airlock. Keeler's voice tightened, rising in pitch. "If the primitive finds the question too advanced—" "Oh, it's not advanced," Zara interrupted, her tone calm yet edged with the subtle danger unique to humans, the mix of boredom and threat. "It's just you're thinking about it the wrong way." Gasps rippled across the hall. Velter leaned forward, nostrils flaring in outrage. "Excuse me? My people were unraveling dimensional mechanics while your species still crawled in mud, barely multicellular." "Right," Zara replied, pushing back her chair. She rose and strolled toward the podium with the languid confidence of someone who already owned the room. "You've been studying. We've been doing." The gaseous Methrin student compressed so violently that it triggered a minor sonic crack. "Impossible. Consciousness bridging demands neural webs of at least 47 trillion synaptic nodes." Zara reached the professor's dais, resting her hand on the console. She turned, facing the Hall of Species with a faint, amused smile. "Does it? That's interesting because—" She raised her right palm. At first, the audience saw only skin, slightly calloused, nails trimmed short, a faint tattoo etched across her lifeline. Then the mark began to glow, softly at first, then with unmistakable radiance. The light pulsed with an alien rhythm none could place, as though in harmony with something beyond the room. A crystalline student whispered in tones that vibrated like breaking glass. "What in the 17 hells of Vortana is that?" The glow intensified, and the air above her palm began to twist. Space folded. Reality bent like fabric tugged from the loom. From the impossible fissure, a hand emerged, a human hand identical in every scar and line. Then came the arm. Then the figure. Through the rift stepped another Zara Blackthorn. "Hi, everyone!" the duplicate announced cheerfully, waving at the stunned assembly. "Apologies for being late. Dimensional traffic in Sector 7C is brutal this time of day." The first Zara smiled. "Class, allow me to introduce my sister. Well, technically she's me, from a timeline where I majored in theoretical physics instead of practical application." "Correction," the second Zara interjected with a grin. "Practical applications of theoretical impossibilities." Professor Keeler's 6 arms trembled uncontrollably, a visible storm of disbelief. This is... Can't just what?" the 2 Zaras asked in perfect synchrony, their voices weaving together like blades crossing. "Can't just demonstrate what your species insists is impossible? Can't just reveal that humans have been casually traversing dimensions while you've been writing academic treatises on why it can't be done?" The chamber dissolved into chaos, the existential kind. Velter's skin cycled violently through 17 shades of purple as he shrieked. "Impossible! The energy demand alone would devour a star." Zara 1 lifted her hand once more. The sigil pulsed, once, twice, before rifts blossomed around the room like flowers bursting open in accelerated time. Through them stepped 6 more Zaras, each identical yet subtly different, their eyes alive with quiet amusement. "Actually," said Zara 3, adjusting her jumpsuit, "it only costs about as much energy as brewing a decent cup of coffee." Which, fun fact, is exactly what fueled the first successful test. The Academy's foundation itself seemed to groan under the collective collapse of alien certainty. "Caffeine," remarked Zara 4, with the casual authority of someone explaining gravity. "Turns out it's one of the fundamental forces of the universe." Who would have guessed? Zara 5 appeared with a clipboard in hand, its surface scrolling with flickering holographic text. "I've been documenting this conversation across 47 dimensional branches. In 39 of them, Professor Keeler faints. In 6, he tries to dissect one of us in the name of science. And in 2, she glanced up, her expression unreadable. He offers us his job." A student with slick, rubbery tentacles raised a limb, its voice rasping like wet leather dragged across shattered glass. "And what happens in the remaining scenarios?" Zara 6 smiled, though it was nothing like a human smile. It carried the weight of terrible knowledge, things that would fester in the mind, keeping entire species awake at night, wondering why humanity had ever been allowed to exist. "In those final variations," she said softly, he asks the smart question. At the podium, Professor Keeler's 6 hands clutched the edge of his desk so tightly the joints of his fingers turned translucent. His voice broke into a trembling croak. "And what is the smart question?" Zara 7 materialized directly behind him, ignoring the sanctity of personal space as though it were just another law of physics to discard. "The smart question," she whispered, "is not how we do it." Zara 8 appeared in a sudden shower of sparks, standing in the center of the hall and violating every fire regulation the Academy had ever written. "It's not even why we do it," she continued. The original Zara's tattoo flared so brightly now it served as the hall's emergency lighting. Her gaze swept across the paralyzed audience. "The real question," she declared, "is why we're showing you." The silence that followed pressed down like gravity. It wasn't simply quiet, it was the hush of revelation, the suffocating awareness that every assumption about humans, every insult about their so-called primitiveness, had been grotesquely miscalculated. Entire civilizations had been wrong. Velter was the first to break the tension. His proud voice, usually deep and resonant, emerged as a squeak. "Why? Why are you showing us?" All 8 Zaras turned in perfect synchronization. The motion was too precise, too unified, more unsettling than the rifts themselves. "Because," they answered together, their voices braided into one unearthly tone, "your graduation exam is in 3 days." A chemical haze drifted through the air, released by the Gorbanian slug being. The scent was unmistakable, existential dread mingled with scorched circuitry. And, added the first Zara, while her counterparts began to step back into their dimensional gateways, your final question will be, demonstrate practical consciousness transfer across dimensional boundaries. The last glimpse the students caught was of 8 identical smiles, smiles that suggested the universe possessed a sense of humor, cruel as it might be. Unfortunately, the punchline would be their final grade. The rifts sealed with a sound like reality exhaling in relief. Zara 1 strolled back to her seat as if she had merely fetched a drink of water, sat down, and resumed scrolling through her ancient tablet. She didn't look up when she asked, almost lazily, "Any questions?" The only reply was the collective sound of 56 species attempting not to hyperventilate, each in their own atmospheric medium. Professor Keelar remained frozen at his podium, his 6 hands still welded to the desk, his eyes fixed on the spot where natural law had been casually torn apart. Finally, his voice returned in a broken whisper. "Miss Blackthorne, what exactly is that tattoo?" For the first time since she'd entered the room, Zara smiled. Not the predatory grin of her duplicates, not the existential smile of interdimensional mastery, just a simple, human, faintly amused smile. Somehow it was more disquieting than all the rest. "Oh, this old thing?" she said, glancing at the palm where the glow receded into an intricate geometric sigil. "It's just my student ID." The hall went dead silent. "Your student ID?" "Yeah." Zara shrugged, as if it should have been obvious. "Every human gets one upon acceptance into the Galactic Exchange Program. Standard issue." She tapped the fading glow. "It contains our dimensional coordinates, a consciousness backup, emergency contact data across 17 realities." She paused, checked something on her tablet, and added casually, "Oh, and apparently the lunch menu for the cafeteria in Dimension 12B. Their pizza is phenomenal." A sound rippled across the lecture hall, indescribable yet unified, the collective realization of dozens of species suddenly aware they had been playing checkers while humanity had been orchestrating a game of 4-dimensional chess with pieces that technically shouldn't exist. "The entire human exchange program," Velter whispered slowly, his 4 eyes stretched wide in disbelief, "is composed of interdimensional travelers." "Well, obviously," Zara replied, tilting her head as though disappointed the deduction had taken this long. "How else do you think we keep up with your lectures? You people talk so fast. We need at least 7 versions of ourselves just to take proper notes." The crystalline student emitted a sound like wind chimes being crushed in a compactor. "But the energy costs, the theoretical architecture, the computational latticework for stable bridging." Zara exhaled, long and patient, the sigh of someone explaining arithmetic to children. "Look, I get it. You're all very clever. Centuries of equations and simulations. But sometimes you just have to try things and see what happens. Humans excel at the trying part." Professor Keeler's composure cracked entirely. His voice rose higher with every word. "You mean to tell me that your species achieved dimensional travel through trial and error?" "Trial and error," Zara said with a nod, "and a truly excellent cup of coffee. We may have also blown up a minor moon during the early tests, but that's just the price of progress." The Gorbanian slug being released another pheromone cloud, this one thick with the scent of burning mathematics. "Don't worry," Zara added with unnerving cheer. "The moon was mostly uninhabited. Just a pirate hideout. Honestly, they had it coming." 46 alien species stared at the human who had just mentioned, far too casually, the destruction of a moon during early experiment. In that moment, they realized that perhaps they had gravely underestimated just how dangerous humans could be when curiosity met determination. Especially when that curiosity involved rewriting the fundamental laws of existence because they were bored on an ordinary Tuesday. The remainder of the lecture passed in stunned silence, broken only by the muffled sounds of alien students experiencing minor breakdowns in their respective ways. Hissing vents, convulsing appendages, nervous pheromones. At the podium, Professor Keelar muttered equations like prayer beads, whispering mathematical mantras in a desperate attempt to restore his faith in a rational universe. When the session ended and the class dispersed in shaken clusters, Zara calmly packed away her battered tablet and made for the exit. "Miss Blackthorne," Keelar called after her, his voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. "The final exam, you were serious about requiring a demonstration of dimensional consciousness transfer?" Zara paused at the doorway and turned. That human smile, so deceptively simple, crossed her face again. "Professor, I'm always serious about my grades. See you in 3 days." As she walked down the corridor, several students swore they heard her humming. The tune carried faintly through the hall, suspiciously similar to funeral music. Professor Keelar stood alone in the lecture chamber, surveying the scorch marks left on the floor where reality itself had been split open. A single thought crystallized in his mind. He was going to need a much stronger drink, possibly imported from another dimension. 3 days later, the examination hall no longer resembled a place of learning, but rather a battlefield bracing for war. 46 species had spent 72 frantic hours in full-blown panic, racing to crack the secret humans had flaunted like a parlor trick. The Vexonian medical ward had treated 17 cases of stress-induced molting. The Alarion dormitories were so thick with anxiety pheromones that industrial air scrubbers had to be installed. Even the normally serene methrin gas beings had compressed into jittering spheres, rolling through the academy grounds like tumbleweeds of existential dread. Professor Keelar stood at the examination podium, looking less like a scholar and more like a man hollowed out by combat with hostile mathematics. His 6 arms trembled. His 4 eyes were bloodshot. The test parameters shook in his grip. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted non-binary entities," he rasped, his voice more suited to reading obituaries than conducting an exam. "Welcome to your final in advanced dimensional mechanics." A crystalline appendage lifted shakily from the crowd, trembling as though trying to signal a distant rescue ship. "Professor, surely you cannot expect us to demonstrate practical consciousness transfer. The theoretical lattice alone would require—" "Oh, spare me," interrupted a familiar voice from the back. Heads turned. Zara Blackthorne strolled into the hall, looking remarkably refreshed, as if she'd spent the weekend sipping tea rather than bending reality. In her hand she carried a coffee cup. Ordinary. Plain ceramic. Yet somehow, impossibly, it radiated an aura of barely contained cosmic menace. "Miss Blackthorne," Keelar said, all 6 hands clinging to his podium like it was the last stable anchor in a collapsing universe. "You seem alarmingly calm for someone about to attempt consciousness transfer." Zara took a slow sip of her coffee. Then she shrugged. "Well, I figured I'd explain how this whole thing actually works before you all melt down trying to reinvent interdimensional travel in 72 hours. The Gorbanian slug being released a cloud of pheromones that smelled of desperate hope laced with lingering terror. "You mean, you are going to help us?" "Help is a strong word," Zara said, setting her cup on a nearby desk. "I prefer to think of it as preventing mass casualties through education." She walked to the front of the hall, her presence commanding. 46 species leaned forward, each breath, or equivalent intake of atmosphere, held in anticipation. "Right then," Zara said, clapping her hands together like an instructor ready to begin. "Who wants to know the first rule of human interdimensional travel?" Tentacles shot upward. Crystalline limbs waggled. Even species without recognizable appendages managed to signal their desperate willingness to listen. "The first rule," Zara announced, her voice echoing with the weight of revelation, "is that consciousness transfer has nothing to do with consciousness." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, the silence of 46 superior intellects suffering simultaneous cognitive collapse. "I beg your pardon?" croaked Keelar, as though the words themselves carried blasphemy. Consciousness transfer is a terrible name for what we do, Zara explained, pacing with professorial rhythm. We don't transfer consciousness. We transfer information. Very specific information. Velter's 4 nostrils flared in confusion. But the neural complexity, the synaptic mapping, the entanglement protocols. Yeah, about that, Zara interrupted, pulling out her battered tablet and tapping its surface. You've been trying to move the entire consciousness, which is like trying to haul an entire library when all you actually need is one specific book. Above the tablet, a holographic projection blossomed into view, a simplified model of the human brain, regions glowing as Zara pointed. Human consciousness, she continued, is astonishingly efficient at compressing data. We don't store everything. We store references. References? Echoed the crystalline student, its harmonic voice warbling like a confused wind chime. Think of it like this, Zara said, flicking her tablet. The projection shifted into the image of a vast library, shelves stretching into infinity. Your species believes consciousness means memorizing every single book in this library. Humans figured out the truth. Consciousness is simply knowing where the books are shelved. The methane gas being condensed slightly, the closest thing its kind had to leaning forward with interest. But how, it asked, voice vibrating like pressurized wind, do you maintain continuity of experience across dimensional barriers? Zara's grin unfurled, a grin mischievous enough to ignite a small star. That, she said, brings us to the second rule of human interdimensional travel. We cheat. Cheat. Professor Keeler's voice cracked 3 octaves higher, an impressive feat for someone already speaking at glass-shattering pitch. Oh, absolutely, Zara said brightly. We cheat like our lives depend on it, because technically they do. She raised her right hand again. The tattoo there ignited with familiar blue light, but instead of tearing open rifts, the glow shaped itself into intricate patterns shimmering above her palm. This isn't just a student ID, she explained. It's a quantum anchor. It keeps me tethered to my home dimension. Which means I'm never completely here. 46 alien minds fractured in unison. To call it enlightenment would be generous. A complete mental breakdown seemed closer to the truth. You mean, Velter's voice carried awe usually reserved for witnessing supernovae. You're not actually present in this dimension? Oh, I'm about 63% present, Zara replied, casually checking her tablet as though consulting a weather forecast. The rest of me is distributed across 12 other dimensions, maintaining constant information exchange via quantum entanglement. The Gorbanian slug being made a noise like air deflating from a very confused balloon. But the energy demands are manageable, Zara interrupted, her tone brisk, if you know what you're doing. Which brings us to rule number 3. She lifted her cup. Coffee is not just a beverage. It's a dimensional lubricant. She took a sip. For an instant the examination hall flickered, as if reality itself had hiccuped. Caffeine, she continued, has fascinating effects on quantum mechanics. It boosts neural processing speed, lowers dimensional drag, and tastes amazing with cream and sugar. Keelar stared at the cup as though it were a weapon of mass destruction. Under the circumstances, it probably was. So? Asked a tentacled student whose species name sounded like wet pasta hurled against stone. Human interdimensional travel is powered by coffee? Coffee, Zara confirmed, and spite. Mostly spite. Humans are astoundingly spiteful, and as it turns out, spite is one of the fundamental forces of the universe. Who knew? This is impossible, muttered the crystalline student. Our calculations prove maintaining stable consciousness across dimensions demands computational power equivalent to a small star. Your calculations, Zara said gently, assume consciousness is a thing instead of a process. You've been trying to move an entire river instead of just following the flow. She tapped her tablet, and the holographic display shifted into a luminous stream of light. Human consciousness isn't a solid object to be transported. It's a pattern, one that can be referenced, reproduced, and maintained across multiple dimensional states. Keeler's scientific instinct overcame his prejudice at last. His voice shook. But how do you maintain identity continuity? Easy, Zara said. We don't. A silence spread through the hall so dense it felt like the universe itself held its breath. I beg your pardon? Keeler whispered. We don't maintain continuity the way you imagine, Zara explained. Each time I cross a barrier, I change. The me that goes in is not exactly the me that comes out. But then, how do you remain you? Zara's expression shifted, philosophical now, which somehow was more terrifying than her mischief. That assumes there was ever only one of me. The examination hall exploded into chaos. The kind of chaos reserved for moments when the core assumptions of sentient existence are casually shredded by a human with a coffee habit. What do you mean? Shrieked 46 voices in 46 languages, a cacophony like the cosmos arguing with itself. I mean, Zara said, raising her voice above the storm, that individuality is a convenient fiction. There are roughly 47,000 versions of me scattered across the local dimensional cluster. And every single one of us, Zara continued, considers ourselves the real Zara Blackthorn. That is impossible, Professor Keeler protested, his voice thin and cracking. Identity cannot be distributed. Consciousness cannot be shared. Cannot, Zara countered. According to who? According to your theories, your equations, your precious assumptions about individuality. She gestured at the room full of alien students, each visibly unraveling in their own way. Every one of you clings to the sanctity of personal identity, never once considering that maybe identity itself is the problem. What do you mean? Asked the Methrin gas being, now condensed into a quivering, fearful cloud. I mean, Zara said, that the reason humans can transfer consciousness so easily is because we realized it was never truly individual to begin with. That's just a story we tell ourselves to feel special. She strolled to her coffee cup and lifted it again. As she drank, the examination hall shimmered. For a heartbeat, the alien students glimpsed other versions of the chamber, other versions of themselves, living out the same moment, only slightly altered. The truth, Zara went on, is that consciousness is a shared phenomenon. A collective process stretching across multiple realities, multiple dimensions, multiple versions of existence. What you call individual identity is simply the fragment your mind can process at any given moment. Velter's 4 eyes widened, the realization dawning. So when you say you transfer consciousness, you aren't moving a single mind at all. You're just adjusting the focus of a multidimensional awareness. Exactly, Zara confirmed. Like tuning a radio to pick up a different station. Keeler sagged into the nearest chair, all 6 arms limp at his sides. His voice trembled with despair. The implications, everything we believed about identity, about the self, meaningless. Complete nonsense, Zara agreed cheerfully. But don't be discouraged. It took humans 3 centuries to figure it out. And yes, we accidentally destroyed 6 moons and a small asteroid belt along the way. A tentacled student raised a limb, desperation quivering in its voice. What about the examination? Zara surveyed the room of 46 species. Their gazes upon her were a volatile mixture of awe, dread, and reverence, the kind once reserved for gods. Well, she said at last, I suppose I should demonstrate. She lifted her hand. The tattoo on her palm ignited, brighter than ever before. This time, the light didn't fracture into rifts or diagrams. Instead, it spread, flowing up her arm, over her body, and outward like a tide. Where the glow touched the alien students, their forms began to shine as well. What is happening? Keeler whispered, wonder and terror braided into a single note. I'm sharing the connection, Zara's voice replied, but now it came from everywhere at once. Her tone resonated through the air, through the walls, through their very minds. I am linking your consciousnesses, temporarily, to the multidimensional awareness network. And then they all felt it. An ocean of thought. The presence of thousands, millions, billions of minds spread across countless realities, bound together like an infinite neural lattice. They sensed alternate versions of themselves, different choices, different lives, all interconnected strands in the same vast web. 446 alien species. It was the most terrifying and most beautiful revelation of their existence. This, Zara said, her voice now harmonized with echoes of herself across dimensions, is what human interdimensional travel truly is. Not moving consciousness but expanding it. Not transferring identity, but recognizing that identity itself had always been an illusion. The connection lasted exactly 37 seconds. Then the light receded, and 46 alien students returned to their individual bodies, their individual minds, their solitary realities. But none of them were truly the same beings they had been 38 seconds earlier. Professor Keelar gazed around the hall at his students, all of them sitting in stunned silence, processing an experience that had detonated the foundations of their existence. His voice, when it came, was fragile and uncertain. Miss Blackthorne, what mark should I give you for this examination? Zara, now once again only one human in one dimension with one very ordinary-looking cup of coffee, simply shrugged. I'll leave that up to you, Professor. But you should know, every human exchange student in the Galactic Academy system just shared the same demonstration. Simultaneously. Across 47 different dimensions. Keeler's throat worked as he tried to form words. What does that mean? Zara grinned one last time. And in that grin lay the promise of a universe far stranger and far more wondrous than any of them had ever imagined. It means, she said, that your final grades are going to be very interesting to calculate. She picked up her battered tablet, drained the last of her coffee, and walked toward the door. Oh, and Professor? Yes. His voice cracked, barely holding together. Next semester, you might want to update your curriculum. You're about 3 centuries behind on consciousness theory. And then she was gone. The examination hall sat in silence, except for the sound of 46 alien species trying desperately to process the fact that everything they thought they knew about reality had just been rewritten, casually, by a human with a caffeine habit and a dangerous gift for crossing dimensions. Professor Keelar stared at the empty room, at the faint traces of quantum energy still hanging in the air, and at the stack of examinations that now demanded he evaluate experiences far beyond the scope of grades. With trembling hands, he reached for his communicator and composed a message to the Academy administration. Request immediate review of Human Exchange Program. Request psychiatric evaluation for faculty. Also request stronger coffee in faculty lounge. Much stronger coffee. As he sent the message, Keelar thought he heard laughter echoing, not in the hall but from beyond it. Laughter carried across dimensions. Laughter that sounded suspiciously like 47,000 versions of Zara Blackthorne, all sharing the same cosmic joke. And somewhere, woven into the vast awareness network that connected all consciousness across the multiverse, the universe itself was laughing too. Outro, from the narrator's voice. And so, dear travelers, the lesson is clear. The cosmos is stranger than theory, and humanity stranger still. If you enjoyed this journey across dimensions, don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the far edge of imagination. Like, share, and comment to let us know what worlds, mysteries, or impossible frontiers you'd like us to explore next. After all, out there among the stars, there are always more stories waiting to be told.